Yeah, so again, good evening to everyone. So we'll begin with the taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, recollecting, bringing to mind the qualities of Buddha, the qualities of Dharma, qualities of Sangha, and the meaning of this act called taking refuge in going for refuge. What does that mean? Right? So try to turn your mind to whatever you can remember from what we have covered so far. And then the meaning of the act and how this act of going for refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the three jewels, can become a very powerful source for the kind of work that is entailed insofar as going beyond suffering. If it is for relaxation, if it is for, a less stressful life, then maybe don't need this refuge. Maybe. But definitely, if it is for the bigger project of becoming free from suffering, personally, I find it hard to imagine staying on track on this journey without refuge. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached by the merit of generosity and other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all wandering beings in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached by the merit of generosity and other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all wandering beings in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached by the merit of generosity and other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all wandering beings. So I take refuge until Bodhi is reached. Bodhi is what we translate as enlightenment. Until enlightenment is reached. Increasingly, I am stepping away from using the word enlightenment. It was maybe helpful, when Buddhism first appeared in the West, to use the word enlightenment to translate Bodhi, because it provided a bridge between the East and the West, so to say. And to some degree, it's tapping into what the Western world knew as the Enlightenment, that period, that shift in the intellectual focus of the West. So there was some deliberate effort to kind of tie those two together. But the commitments of the Western, enlightenment and the Buddha's Bodhi actually quite different. It was good to, I guess, trick people into becoming open and receptive, to Buddhist teachings. But at this point, I think we can go a little further. Yeah? And in some ways also to unentangle some of the unfortunate entanglements with what enlightenment means in the Western context. Etymologically, Bodhi is actually closer to the English word of awakening. Bodhi doesn't so much have, if we just put aside, that there was this whole big change in Europe and called the Enlightenment. Putting aside that, just those words, English words of enlightenment. Bodhi is not so much about light as it is about waking up. So the opposite of waking up is we are now asleep. And the connotation of sleep is not rest. The connotation of sleep is being unaware. In the negative sense of sleep, unaware. Did you sleep through, our country turning into whatever? Right? Whatever side you stand on this whole change that's going on. So, did you sleep through it, right? In that sense of a negative sense. So, Buddha is awake, the awakened one. So, Bodhi is to become awake. So, I take refuge until I'm awake. And then at that point, you become a source of refuge for others, which is also addressed in the recitation. So in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached. By the merit of generosity and the other perfections, more literally, it's by the merit of generosity and so forth, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake, for the benefit, for the welfare of all wandering beings. So as I said, wandering beings, right? In this context, yes, all who wander are lost. In other contexts, especially in Asheville, you're not lost. You're just wandering. In wonder, W-O-N. But in this context, as a wandering being, it means, it has actually connotation of having been dislocated from safety, from home. Hence, taking refuge. So we're all refugees. We have been dislocated from our true home, which is the awakened state. So we are committing to becoming awake. Of course, initially, because we want to be free from suffering. But what quickly follows is the realization that it's not enough to only be thinking about ourselves. That if this is going to work, right, it has to be also for others. Now there's a caveat here, you cannot just take these prayers or recitations without taking the broader context. The broader context is, having just said, right, I'm going to achieve the state of Buddha to become awake, not just for myself, but also for all beings, right? So there it's saying, to bring all beings to enlightenment. But the caveat is what? Especially in the context of this course, this class we're doing. What's the caveat?
They have their own karma.
They have their own karma. Yeah, you cannot, simply take someone from a state of being asleep and magically put them in a state of being awake. So you should not also think, like in the end, you are in charge of whether they are asleep or they are awake. No, every one of us is in charge, so to say, when it comes to where it really truly matters. No one can wake you up if you insist on being asleep. So we also cannot forget that. And so they say, like any religion, right? The most important person in the religion, especially over time, they become like more and more amazing and more powerful, Buddhists also, got into that. So until the Buddha is like so amazing, so powerful, right? And so then eventually you run into this question of like, well, if Buddha, and then you now at this point you can also substitute, well, if God is so powerful, right, why not just wave a wand, right? Or whatever gods and Buddhas hold, wave their finger or blink, right? Then all suffering disappears from the world. Why don't they do that? Now, obviously, none of them have done that. Whether we're talking about Buddhists or we're talking about God. So here, is it because of the lack of compassion? At least in the Buddhist case, we say no, it's not due to lack of compassion. Buddhas have fully developed the full possibility of kindness and compassion. But they cannot wave a wand and end all suffering. They don't have that kind of power. And for that matter, nobody has that kind of power. But we still train this mind of doing this for the sake of all beings. Why? Because this is part of extending the limits of our hearts, which is boundless, but over time has become limited. Due to specific programs that we have invested in, patterns of behavior, through the process of self-making, manufacturing self, solidifying self, reinforcing self, a sense of self, until it becomes so limited, until it becomes so tight. And this is what we've been looking at. Okay? So the last 2 weeks, kind of loosely based on the book that I have recommended that you also read on your own. The last 2 weeks we have looked at the first 2 chapters, right? The introduction, and then last week we looked at the notion of karma, bright karma, dark karma, right? And now in this chapter, we are looking at what the author calls the karma of meditation. And so in the last 2 weeks, the topic of meditation or bhavana has come up, but not so kind of directly. Yeah, not so directly. But in this chapter, really, he really links for us that meditation, that the practice of bhavana, which I talked about, getting used to, familiarizing, programming, yes, but reprogramming. And before we reprogram or deprogram, we need to understand, right, how this programming happens. And the understanding is not just intellectual, although necessarily, I suppose, we begin there. But don't get too carried away by theoretical things that certain genre of Buddhist texts are very good at doing. Yeah, and they are actually pretty amazing. You know, but insofar as your immediate existential kind of issues, merely knowing a lot about that is not going to help much until you take them into your experience, until you relate to those teachings in a different way. And this chapter 3, I think, does a very good job of helping us relate to what we've been talking about in 1 and 2 in the context of what we more conventionally recognize as meditation. And so this chapter talks about physical posture and how to relate to, how to work with embodiment of having a body. How working with embodiment can give rise to understanding. Understanding about what? Understanding about how this programming happens. Then you can deprogram and reprogram. But then all of this takes patience. You cannot rush into it. And you cannot do. In fact, there is one section, right, called doing the work of not doing, right? Something like that. So this is especially apt for, I think, many of us who live in the United States, right? It's the can-do, right? The can-do culture. Even in the Western world, I think we are like super can-do, you know, right? Just the way we talk, you know, awesome, right? The English, meanwhile, would just say, that's not bad. We are all about, you know, yes, you know. Now, of course, the other side of that is what? Doom and darkness. That's what I think. That's the price you pay, you know. Awesome. As long as everything kind of, right, working well with the program that you like, that you are familiar with. And once, you know, conditions don't coincide with your program, it's all doomed. It's all doomed. And with the English, it's not too bad. So, yeah, it's just not too bad, as opposed to not bad. But when you are a culture where it's awesome, you know, then doom comes very quickly. When the sun is bright, the shadow is strong. So part of the training is to actually help us not fixate and solidify in unskillful ways. There is a place to be firm and steady, and that's one word that I like a lot in this chapter. Steadying the heart, steadying your emotions. Not all emotions are bad. The goal is not to become like a stone, no longer feeling anything, but to temper your emotions and to steady your emotions so that it doesn't shake you so easily. It's not that you stop feeling, but you have a more skillful and therefore more free relationship with what's going on. So, the karma or the action, the intentional action of meditation. And the subtitle here is resetting the mind, reprogramming the mind, reprogramming these behaviors. Sometimes when I do these guided meditations, so otherwise every Thursday we have open Sangha, and the format of this is the first half an hour is a guided meditation. And the guided meditation that we do varies. Kind of deliberately, I don't want to kind of insist, right? Everybody who leads that have to follow this script, because I think that reinforces that idea, that belief, that expectation, that technique will solve our problems. Attitude solves our problems. Because attitude is where the problem comes from. So attitude is where the problems will be solved, not technique. Technique should be only 20% of your investment. Changing attitude should be the other 80%. Anyway, this is also the time to make this announcement. Next 2 Tuesdays, we won't have this format. Next 2 Thursdays, next 2 Thursdays, we will have more the format of the regular open Sangha, which is the first half an hour is a guided meditation. Then we take a break of 15-20 minutes where we catch up with each other, get to know each other, and this is good opportunity because we have kind of some very new people here, and some people who are not new at all, but they have been taking a break, and then now they're checking back in. So good to get reacquainted. 15-20 minutes, and we normally have snacks that we share, and we have tea, we have enough mugs, I think, but maybe a good idea to bring your own mug. And 15-20 minutes of that, and then followed by 40 minutes of discussion. In this case, the discussion will be grounded on what we have covered so far and also the reading. I'm not going to be here because I will be in Peru for the next 2 Thursdays. Then we'll come back. And when we come back, I will try to kind of finish the course before I leave for Asia. I'm going to be gone for 2 months. 1 month is my own training that I have to continue to receive these transmissions in India. So that will be March, and then April, I'm going to go see my family in Malaysia. So that's the scheduled timeline that we're talking about. And then again, right before I leave, literally like 2 days before I leave, is the Beyond Fear retreat, the first weekend of March. So when I do
Before
leave,
you continue,
yes,
if we could adjust the mic just
Yeah.
slightly, just so it's a little bit better to.
okay. Well, time to time, remind, it slips. So when now I want to eat it. So when I lead these guided meditations, this is normally how I do it. So let's do a little bit of that. We'll be brief. We're not going to spend half an hour. Now let your body and mind settle into their own places. Approach this with the attitude of inviting both body and mind to settle into their own places, inviting body and mind to find their own places of rest and ease. In terms of physical posture, there are two elements that are helpful for this exercise. One is to be seated in a way that is stable, with your weight evenly distributed, and seated in a way that will minimize the need to shift, to move, to fidget. Of course, it's quite normal, especially if you're new to this, that you will move, you will shift, you will fidget. So this is not a rule or a commandment that you should not move, but you should slowly, patiently allow your body to settle in a way that will minimize the need to, the desire to move and fidget. So experiment with sitting in a way that contributes to your body being still, and your body will only cooperate to be still and unmoving if it is comfortable and at ease. Also sit in such a way that your torso, your body, is upright. Having a body that is upright in a way that is, again, at ease and comfortable also means that you are not using unnecessary energy to keep the body this way or that way, but rather your frame, your bones, muscles are all in a place where minimal energy needs to be exerted over keeping this posture. So these two postures, these two elements of this, two elements of this posture sit in a way that is stable and minimizes moving, the need to move, the need to fidget, and sit in such a way that the torso is upright. And these two directly contribute to two qualities of mind that we seek to cultivate when we do bhavana, when we meditate, which is a mind that is stable, steady, a heart that is stable and steady and even, as well as a heart and mind that is clear, radiant, and bright. Body and mind are the two parts of our being that the Buddha particularly called attention to. The Buddha said, what we have here, without any doubt, without any disputing, and without any theorizing, is body and mind. Furthermore, body is just a convenient term for a whole package of physical processes that is going on outside, inside, obvious and subtle. Is the movement. It's the movement of a set of processes that is physical. What we call mind is likewise not a thing, but a bunch of processes, mental, emotional processes that is taking place. Connecting these two and holding these two together is another body. If you want to call it a body, it's the energetic body. And the coarse aspect of that energetic body is breath. Breath is both energy and a type of body. Breath is the bridge between body and mind. And so the Buddha also taught us to bring attention to the experience of breath. So now, whenever you're ready, taking your time to let body settle, making subtle movements or change in your body posture as necessary, inviting body to settle. As you do that, whenever you're ready, you can also extend your attention to the experience of breath. At least right now, there's no need, in case you have received instructions before or you have read somewhere that you should focus your breath in a particular spot, here or there. Actually, right now, please refrain from doing that, but instead, experience breath. Turn your attention to the experience of breath, rising, ceasing, entering your body, leaving your body, coming and going. No need to count, no need to assign numbers, no need to focus, but repeatedly turn your attention to the experience of breath. Notice the interaction between breath and your physical body. And notice the connection between breath and your mental, emotional body. So these three bodies, the body of breath, the energetic body, the body of emotions and thoughts, and physical body. Let your attention be immersed in observing these three bodies interacting with each other. And remembering there are not three things, but three processes. And therefore they are not solid. They are dynamic, they are flowing, they are changing and moving. Any comments or clarification needed? Yes.
Keep referencing a book. What is the book you're referencing?
Karma and the End of Karma. Yeah, it's a book that you can download online, and you can also write the monastery that publishes this to have them send you a physical copy if they have it. It may be out of print. Kamma, Kamma, and the end of Kamma.
The end, Carl.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes. Did you have a question?
Just this guy keeps sliding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about nothingness and emptiness, because for my Western mind, it's real hard to wrap my beauty, brain, mind, whatever, cortex around those concepts.
Emptiness or nothingness?
Yeah, I'm toward the end of, Zen Mind Computer.
Right.
Suzuki talks, in, several passages about the realization that everything comes from nothing.
Right.
It arises from whatever and sinks back into whatever.
Yeah, that's a slightly different way of approaching this topic.
Okay.
In-
Well, and that's
in-
way
in-
out there for me.
Yeah, in Zen
I
mind,
read Buddhism and attending events for
yes. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind is one of the spiritual classics and an excellent book.
But you're saying it's a little different.
Yeah, the approach
Than
is,
the end of karma?
yeah, the approach is different.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not it's not like wrong or, you know.
Different take.
Yeah, a different, coming at this from a different, slightly different, yeah,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know about,
right.
thank you.
Sure. Zoomland, you all can write, you know, and there's a question here, yes.
I think that you've given this definition of this word before,
Uh-huh.
but just a little caption that I took out of the
Yes.
text was, meditation develops awareness that liberates us from the feedback loop of action and result.
Yes,
Comma, vipaka?
Vipaka.
Just,
Yeah, vipaka
see
is
what
result.
Vipaka is. Vipaka is just
Yeah,
result.
literally. These days when we say karma, we actually include both. But to be technically more accurate is karma vipaka, or karma vipaka. Sanskrit also pronounces vipaka. Karma and vipaka or karma vipaka. It's hyphenated, so to say. Cause and effect. Cause and result. Yeah. Yes.
This is going back a few weeks when you were talking some about reincarnation, and I've been having the question.
The process of rebirth, yeah, right.
Yes, and one thing I've been sort of puzzling with is I have the sense that in Buddhism, there's the idea that the self is illusory.
Yes,
It's not really what we think it is.
yes. The self is illusory. It's not what we think it is. Yes.
And then sometimes when I hear about reincarnation, I think people are sort of suggesting that this self was in the
Correct.
past life and is recurring,
Correct.
and it seems almost contradictory to me that
Correct. Yeah, correct. That the way people tend to talk about and understand is contradictory. Correct. And I think last week I gave a different approach to this whole thing, where it does not need to be metaphysical. And we talked about continuity. And we talk about relating to karma, right? And previous life and future lives. And how I relate to this. You know? We talked about thinking of it as a river, right? If you throw trash upriver, unless something happens in between here and downriver there, trash is going to turn up downriver. And so, at any point you are standing, it's both upriver and downriver. And just on that level is sufficient. Now, if we were doing a course about, the mechanics of, mind, consciousness continuing, then we have other things to talk about. Yes.
At the beginning of today's meeting, you were talking about the chant at the beginning and seeking enlightenment for ourselves because that can help seeking enlightenment because that can help other people.
Yes.
And then you did a really good job explaining why we can't just, enlighten other people and bring them to that. And so, and then I think I missed, what is the connection then? How does our own enlightenment help others?
First of all, you become less annoying to other people. And that's helping a lot of people. Not you personally, I don't know you. But we can all assume, that we all can be less annoying to other people. And so that's very helpful. And that relieves a lot of suffering. But more directly, right? So the first thing is we become lesser and lesser of a condition for other people's suffering. Cause always comes from each of us. But each of us also provide the conditions for other people's suffering to ripen. So when we talk about karma, we also talk about not just causes and effects, but also conditions. So at the very least, the more awake we are, the less we become, whether intentionally or unintentionally, a condition for other people's suffering to flare up, to ripen. So that's one. Second one, you become more able to guide others. Which is why in the Buddhist context, the fanciest, the most significant actually word for referring to the Buddha is teacher. Just as the word savior is the most important word for Christians when referring to Jesus. In Buddhism, more than any word, the Buddha actually has many terms like Buddha, the awakened one, which is what we're familiar with, right? Almost turning it into like his name, like Jesus H. Christ, But actually, the most important word actually is teacher, because that shows that the most ever that anyone can do for us is to show us the way, the guide, the teacher. And so the more we are Buddha-like, the more we have the ability to effectively guide. So for all intents and purposes, it's like a savior. Except that in this system, you can't really save someone. In that sense of, pulling you out of confusion. So then you stop becoming a condition for other people's suffering to flare up, to ripen, and instead you become a condition for other people's happiness to arise, all the way to ultimate happiness arising, which is them becoming awakened, them becoming Buddha.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is from Rachel. We are using Trent's Zoom. Last week, Dr. Lai spoke about puja as helpful for generating devotion. What's the difference between devotion one feels for the three jewels versus for one's spouse, for instance? And isn't it a form of intentional karma? Thank you.
Yes, both devotion to the three jewels, and devotion to one's spouse, and devotion to one's country, all sorts of devotions, they are intentional actions. Then, right, intention determines the quality of the act. And so if you have the same kind of intention motivating your devotion to the three jewels as the intention that you have that motivates your devotion to your spouse or to your country, then the result will be quite different. And so the devotion to the three jewels comes from the intention of admiring, right, the qualities that the three jewels possess and wanting to have those qualities ourselves. And so that your mind becomes Buddha, your speech becomes Dharma, and your actions become Sangha. Which is quite different, at least based on most people I know, from their devotion to their partner or their family. Those types of devotion have different intentions behind. Not sure if I answered the question, but anyways.
There was another part to the question.
Sure.
Is it a form of intentional karma?
Yes, they are all intentional. But what kind of intentions makes all the difference? That's also the meaning of, karma is intention, right? Then we also learned, right? Intention determines attention. Then from last week and this week, we also start to see how intentions are based on habit and programming. Habit and programming is the result of actions. Actions come from attention. Attention is determined by intentions. Good news, bad news. But mostly focus on good news. Now, we can do something about it. We can change. We can reprogram. So when we look at this week's readings, this chapter 3, it begins by calling attention to how there are three complementary modes that often is said to underlie what the Buddhist path entails, which is training in what he calls ethics, I call disciplined conduct, training in meditation or samadhi, and training in wisdom. So one way to think about what the training entails, Buddhist training, is working with these three modes, these three complementary modes. So disciplined conduct, I don't use ethics because it's ethics, of course, it's ethics for sure, but it also goes beyond ethics. It's a certain, disciplined conduct. Now, of course, you could also say, well, disciplined conduct, soldiers have that too. Very disciplined, but no, that's not the Shila here. So the ethics is very much part of it. But it's not just the do's and the don'ts that we associate with morality and ethics. It goes down to the details of the Buddha recommended, that when we walk, we should walk a certain way. Your gaze should be in a certain way. When you sit a certain way. You sit on certain things and you don't sit on certain things. So those are not really moral lapses if you sit like that, But it's not disciplined conduct. Yeah, if you are including, if you are riding on a 15-hour plane ride and you are drooling away. That's actually lack of disciplined conduct. But it's not disciplined conduct like you need to be 15 hours and like a Marine, It's also not that. So it involves, right, not just ethics, morality, but optimal kind of body, speech, and mind, how you carry yourself, how you are in the world, how you occupy your space makes a difference. So often in the early scriptures, and even in later, but especially in the early scriptures, often you see that people came to the Buddha or approached the Buddha's disciples merely having seen them. They don't even hear from them yet. They don't even know what they are about. But the way in which the Buddha and his disciples carried themselves, the way they moved through space, there was something about it. We're not talking about they were levitating. Ooh, they were levitating. I need to know who they are, right? We're not talking about, doing something kind of miraculous. And the early texts especially don't talk about that. But just the way they moved through space, just the way they carry themselves, in a way that is most natural and attractive. It attracts the heart. It does not excite the heart. That's something else. We are so coarse in a way, in the way that our heart works, that we only notice what excites the heart. But in these early descriptions of what brought people to the Buddha, often they say they saw him. And their heart experienced coolness, not excitement, but coolness and attraction. It soothes their mind. So this is all part of this disciplined conduct. So it's not morality. It's not some kind of imposed tightness. Although if you're not careful observing, like in the monk's conduct, it says there are 250 or at least 227 in a different tradition, do's and don'ts. Yes, there is a way to observe all the 227 where you become so tight and so rigid. Then also you are not really training in what's called Shila, which is the first element. And in a way, you cannot really skillfully, effectively train in Shila if you did not have the second mode, or the second element, which is translated as meditation or samadhi. And in this chapter in particular also, Ajahn Sucitto says, normally people think of, including Buddhist writers, including some Buddhist texts, talk about samadhi as something that is very tight, as something to achieve, something to gain. Because it's normally translated as concentration. Then what do we think of when we say concentration? Well, all of us have been kids before. All of us have been yelled by adults, concentrate! In whatever language you have, right? Stop fidgeting, concentrate. Then we think, oh, samadhi is concentrate. And then again, there are some texts that seem to suggest that kind of concentration, but actually, samadhi is not that. Samadhi comes from the root of sama, and sama is same. And what's the connotation of being same? Meaning even, meaning steady. The steadying of the heart, the evenness of mind, and also the connotation of wide open. The steadying and the stability and the evenness that comes from broad openness, not, narrow and tight. So, skillful, disciplined conduct requires samadhi. Samadhi also cannot be achieved, and there are levels of samadhi. It's not like either yes or no, have or don't have. It's layers and layers of samadhi. So samadhi cannot really be cultivated if you don't have disciplined conduct. Some measure of training in disciplined conduct. And without samadhi, wisdom, which is understanding, clear seeing, cannot develop. But clear seeing, or some measure of wisdom, have to be there before any disciplined conduct is going to work. So these are three modes that mutually reinforce each other. And they're like the three tripods, the three legs of a tripod. And so these three, right? And then particularly if we are to zoom into meditation or samadhi, how do we train samadhi? And so I want to highlight some of the things that he says here. Now, all these have active aspects. The training in Shila, disciplined conduct, the training in samadhi, and the training in wisdom. But what they lead to is a quietening, the quieting and the ceasing of mental activity. they quiet the noise of mental activity. Again, not like, Frank Costanza. Serenity now, try to drown out the noise by having a louder noise. Not going to work, okay? But just letting it quiet down. And it says here, it's the end of mental activity. Please don't misunderstand this. You do not train the Buddhist path, to become an inanimate object. Here, mental activity is talking about the noisy, busy mind, the constant chatter that goes on, those words that keep coming, and you can't stop them, is to make that neurotic mental activity stop. That's possible. No, you don't stop feeling. You don't stop perceiving. You don't stop functioning. But that kind of mental activity, you can put an end to. How this chapter tries to show us, in one way of looking at it is, when you begin to realize how much energy you actually give to that activity, and that's why you are exhausted, you are stressed, you are bent out of shape all the time. When you begin to see, right, at what price this mental activity is taking place, you're more willing to say, maybe I don't need this. Right now, we are not yet convinced. We may be intellectually convinced, but our habits are not yet convinced that this way of existing is not at all what we naturally want. But we are stuck. But we can get unstuck. And this chapter gives us a more concrete, it's basically a guided meditation, a big chunk of this chapter. This chapter also calls attention to the three modes of being, or the three aspects of our being when you say me, right? Well, one way of looking at what are we talking about, there are many ways to think about, when we say I or me, right? One is the body-mind, right? And in the guided meditation that I shared with you, it's looking into this body, this mind. And then when you zoom closer into it, you see that it's not two things at all. It's two sets of processes that are going on and constantly interacting. Then breath as energy kind of pulls it all together. Then they affect each other. Here in this chapter, they talk about the three types of sankhara. Right? Sankhara, he says, can also be understood as formations. We are constantly fabricating and forming. Right? From moment to moment, formations are taking place. But formations can fall into three general categories. Physical formations, what I call physical processes. Mental emotional formations, citta sankhara. So kaya sankhara is physical processes. Citta sankhara is mental emotional processes. Then vachi or vaka sankhara, vaka samskara in Sanskrit, is speech formation. Speech formation, as he points out, is not just the speech that we vocalize, but the mental chatter. Then you say, well, then what about citta sankhara? Citta sankhara is less on the level, it's not the the mental activity that comes with words, but even more basic than the words. Feelings, you could say. Of course, this is just offering, right, kind of windows to look into what is going on, right? So we also don't need to become too wedded to, well, that is a body formation, that is a speech formation, and it cannot be the two, or, these are just frameworks, windows for us to investigate, to look more deeply. What is going on here? So he talks about, right, these three types of sankhara. And the more we're able to see that they're actually sankharas, they are formations, they are processes, then the less we need to fight false demons. They're not our enemies. Even the sankharas, they're not enemies. It's just we don't understand how they are behaving. And then undesirable results turn up. Then here he talks about, from another perspective, there are three aspects. Bodily intelligence gives you a sense of being here. Emotional intelligence is meanwhile telling you how you are, while the rational faculty, the third, is suggesting what you should do about this. This is on page 67. All very lively. These three intelligences run on energy, and they interact. The energies of moods and thoughts trigger resonances in the body's nervous system, and vice versa. Sometimes a burst of irritation or fear will cause a contraction in this somatic domain. Or the notion of having lots of things to do generates an emotional spin in which you lose awareness of your body. So the goal of Buddhist meditation, to the degree that you set aside time to meditate, again, is not just, although as a prerequisite, calming things, clearing a space, feeling rested, relaxed, is necessary. But that's not the end game. That's not the goal. The goal is to create this space, give yourself a break from all that impulsive, programmed behavior, so that you can learn about how this programming happens, and then have the ability to deprogram and to reprogram. That's the goal of why we meditate. Not just to look good, not just to feel good, but to be good, The mind is busy being or creating me. The dynamic that keeps recycling karma is carried out by programs, habits, coded instructions that we associate with computer software, which in this case are organic. The capacity to form concepts and articulate them is the verbal program, the speech sankhara, the verbal formations. The heart's nature to be affected by feelings and impressions, the chitta being affected by feelings and impressions, and to formulate impulses and responses, that's the chitta formation, the chitta sankhara. The body also operates according to its program, which most crucially is geared to generating and circulating energy through breathing in and out. And the most subtle and the most basic sankhara of the body is breath. And that's why the Buddha recommended breath as a very powerful, effective topic to do this work. So we all have heard of mindfulness of breath meditation. Yes, there's a question.
I don't have a question.
Uh-huh.
I just want to slow you down
Mm,
because you're putting forth incredible stuff.
yes,
I feel like I'm drinking.
yes. So that's why I'm building a forest monastery, and then you can come live there with me. Then we will not be in a rush. Yes, I apologize. I have to. But all to say, it's here. Take time, If I don't ever see you again, I will be very happy to know that you will take time, maybe even the rest of your life, learning from this book. I have real regard for this book. So I'm just trying to pull out some things to kind of point you to look what you can learn here, And then I add also, like I said, again, this disclaimer, Please, what I say may not be exactly what Ajahn Sucitto would agree with. And there are disagreements, even within the Buddhist family. It's healthy, Why does disagreement have to be bad? Only when we take it to a degree where it becomes us versus them, out of fear. That's where the problem is. The problem is not disagreeing. The problem is not knowing how to disagree. Yeah? So, anyway. The ability to conceive and articulate is adjusted to operate in terms of specific languages, attitudes, and ways of thinking. Our emotional program of liking and disliking also gets fine-tuned to a range of individual specific responses. As these programs get fixed and made familiar, they become mine. And then when you have a lot of mine, then your sense of me, right, becomes clearer. But clearer also means stronger. Stronger also means now need to defend. Can you see, right? This is what you're committing to. Because earlier in this process, it looks quite innocent, right? But at some point in this journey, it becomes, you are signing over a blank check now. And then you go, wait, where did all my money go? Or where did all my energy go? Well, it went into the project of maintaining me. Now, we're not saying, right, all senses of me and I is bad. No, the Buddha actually didn't say that. There are healthy, good sense of I and me. And the Tara program picks up from there and say, let's replace the unhealthy sense of I and me with a healthy sense of I and me. And in this case, you take on, and this is specific to Tibetan Buddhism, so you won't find it in this book. So this is where there's disagreement, right? Here we talk about taking on the identity of Tara and what Tara means, that set of principles, that set of qualities that we're working with to embody. So here, as these programs get fixed and made familiar, they become mine. Then from an accumulation of mine, me turns up. But you see, me is not a given. That's why, right, when we are having our Zen moments, as they say, When you are in this Zen moment, right? You don't have this sense of me or I, but you are at your best moment. We all have experienced this in different contexts. It's not so mysterious. Yeah, there is the loss of I and me that leads to trauma. Yes. When a child is being abused, he or she has to pull out of the I and dissociate. We're not talking about that, obviously. Here we're talking about a way of being where me and I is not necessary. Anyway, continuing here, he says, so then from there, I'm a Swedish woman. I'm a rational humanist, etc., etc. Whatever labels, I'm progressive, I'm conservative, right? In the mood, the country now, right? I'm for this, I'm against that. Yeah? This is the self-construction program. In Pali or Sanskrit, it's called ahankara. Ahankara literally is ahang is I am. Kara is making. The making of this sense of I am. Yes, I think, therefore I am. I don't think he realized what he was saying. I think, therefore I am. Now, that phrase has a whole different meaning to that. This is the self-construction program, the ahankara. It collects these subjective attributes, inclinations, and psychological patterns. And that collection becomes me and mine. And that becomes the basis for actions and speech. That in turn feeds into, right, the I making. Okay. 3 minutes.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I think I kind of can get a hold of what training the mind within the context of ethics means and within the context of meditation, but not so much within the context of wisdom, because I guess there's a part of me that sees the wisdom more as a result, that sees the wisdom part as the result. So what does training the mind within the context of wisdom look like?
Oh, right now. That's what it looks like. Wisdom. Too big, that word. Clear seeing. Understanding. We develop understanding.
Seeing things as they are.
Well, before you see them as they are, you have to, go through a whole...
Right.
Yeah. Today you gain some understanding. That's a type of wisdom.
But it seems like it's a result.
No, you work at it.
How?
Right now, this is called wisdom that arises through listening and learning. Then wisdom that arises through contemplating, reflecting when you go home. Then wisdom that arises from putting it into the program. Yeah? Wisdom is not just a thing. No, it's an act. It's not, I understand what you mean. It's not just the result, and I think we have overplayed that way of thinking about wisdom. It has become like a god of sorts, You have become God, you have become wisdom, No, wisdom is a lot more organic. In this moment, when you're able to relate to an experience, right? And not, when I say when you're able, also even that expression sounds as if, no rhyme or reason, you're able to relate. You know? But you have to push yourself, right? Out of like your patterns of thinking, and to push, right? But not in any kind of like loud, bombastic way, but lightly lean into it, you know. And that's a type of wisdom. That's a type of wisdom. That's how you cultivate the wisdom. Meaning cultivate understanding. Understanding is not just result, it's also cause. But don't think too much. We are veering off in the direction of thinking about this. And Ajahn Sucitto says, you know, don't think.
I think for me, sometimes I confuse samadhi with wisdom.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, but that's okay. These are just terms, you know. Yeah. You need to know these terms when you're put on the spot to teach, you know. But otherwise, you know, even when you're put on the spot to teach, if you're good at it, you know how to redirect the conversation. Tricks of the trade, I can tell you later. That's a different course to sign up. So, okay, tonight we're going to end here. I try to end on time, you know. I often say, you know, there are pets and people waiting for you at home, you know. Don't want them to resent you coming to Urban Dharma. So we're going to end here tonight with this. And as I said, the next 2 Thursdays, the format will be different. And maybe some of you will say, well, I'm going to take a break. That's fine, you know. And one more thing to add, unfortunately, the discussion part of the next 2 weeks is hard to do interactively with you folks on Zoom. Yeah? We will still Zoom it, but it will be, you know, it won't be an organic discussion that includes you guys on Zoom. So, an apology. But you can watch the discussion that unfolds, you know, in the room here. And then, of course, you know, if you're really moved to say something, of course, you know, you can unmute, but to have a real kind of back and forth, you know, probably not realistic. Just to say that. But I hope you will take the opportunity of these next 2 weeks to kind of discuss without me being here. Also sometimes allows discussion. But, you know, give and take, right? I know, you know, some of you would be here and going, oh, I didn't come here to listen to you. Like somebody else in the room, you know. So we give and take, yeah. So next 2 Thursdays, we'll do this. And the guided meditation will be led by different people and different styles, different techniques. And again, I said, you know, it's deliberate. I don't want too much emphasis on technique. Because already as Americans, I think we have placed a lot of trust in technique and technology. You know? And now, of course, we are also having great fear of technology. But that's not where the problem is. The problem and the solution is in the citta, is in the heart. Fix that. Then you will know what technology serves you, what technology doesn't serve you. Fix the citta. Then you know what politics serves you, serves others. And when I say serve you, it's in the Buddhist definition of serve you. which means also serves others for the good, for the greater good. But if we go about, deciding all those other things without understanding what the chitta is, what the heart is, then you get into this hate and love, rejecting or grasping. And all of those take so much energy that it depletes us. This brightness is lost. And it becomes heavy. And it becomes dark. So what the Buddha taught is attend to the citta that arises from understanding, which comes from stability of minds and moods, which comes from disciplined conduct, which comes from understanding. Now these three is in this loop that is without beginning or end. So at the end we think, this is what we call dedicating merit. Full circle, we begin by saying, this I do not just for me, but for the good and the benefit of all. Just as I want happiness and don't want suffering, is there anyone who is different from that? No. So then at the end, we come full circle to say, then whatever I have done in the last hour and a half, whatever good especially that I have experienced, that I have learned, may others find this good and join Urban Dharma. No. We don't do this. That's how you not become a cult. When we say may they experience this too, we're not talking about this. We're talking about the citta becoming lighter and clearer. May they find that, however they're going to find it. May they have the circumstance. And even may I become a condition for them finding it. And so take a moment to dedicate in this way. That's what we call dedicating merit. Thank you for coming. Stay warm. Be careful going home. If you can help us put things away, we really appreciate that. And for me, I will see you when I come back from Peru. Bye bye, Tata.